So we're at the beginning of Refugee Week 2021. It's an opportunity to recognise and to celebrate the richness and diversity that refugee communities offer us as a country. Diversity and excellence clearly go hand in hand. Diversity is not just critical to an equitable society, but it fosters creativity, productivity, innovation, and all of these things are good for every single one of us living in our community. But what we like to do in Refugee Week, as well as celebrate the richness and diversity of refugee culture, we also want to use this as an opportunity to reflect on the experience and ongoing challenges for those who arrive in Australia seeking safety. The theme of this year's Refugee Week is Unity, the Way Forward. It comes off the back of the isolating and fragmenting experiences of 2020, in which communities from a refugee background were amongst the most impacted by COVID. And of course, Australia's migration and detention policies for people seeking asylum is in the national spotlight currently, with the ongoing plight of the Murugappan family, who you may have heard referred to as the Biloela family in the media, after the name of the town where they lived. So how can we all collectively head towards a stronger, safer and more inclusive society? It's my pleasure now to properly welcome the panellists. First, Hani Abdili. Hani Abdili is a journalism student, writer and poet. In 2014, Hani left her home country of Somalia to seek protection in Australia. She has received numerous awards for her community work and currently holds a 5-year Safe Haven Enterprise visa. She is an ambassador for refugee advice and casework service. Welcome, Hani. Bakit David is a volunteer interpreter at Mercy House of Welcome and was previously a volunteer at a youth organisation, Rotaract Australia. He is currently studying community services at TAFE. Bakit arrived in Australia from Sudan when he was 17. Welcome, Bakit. Ahmad Sawan is a solicitor at RACS, which he joined in 2018. Ahmad is responsible for coordinating the RACS Data Breach Project, which has helped over 400 people lodge a complaint to the OAIC regarding the 2014 immigration data breach. He also works on RACS Stateless Children program, represents clients held offshore on Nauru and Papua New Guinea in their applications for transfer under Medivac, and works closely with young people who were taken to Nauru as unaccompanied minors. Welcome, Ahmed. And last but not least, Dorothy Hodnott was principal of Holroyd High from 1995 to 2018, where 1 in every 3 students had been in Australia less than 3 years, and about 60 students at that time were of refugee background. She has been a strong advocate for the human rights of children and young people, particularly refugee and asylum seekers. And in 2002, she established the Refugee Scholarship Fund, Friends of Zainab, now part of the Public Education Foundation, which helps young refugees and asylum seekers around Australia complete high school and go to university. She was awarded the Australian Human Rights Medal in 2014 for her work with disadvantaged young people and her advocacy for the rights of refugee students. Welcome, Dorothy. So now we'll open to the panel, and as I said before, feel free to start typing questions if you have questions. So I might begin with you, Hani. Hani, you are a published poet and have performed twice at the Sydney Opera House. You're currently a journalism student. What do you see as the power of the written word?
I think, Verity, I can say a lot about that because I would like to if I actually acknowledge one thing with the current situation that we have on a temporary visas, it's really hard to actually wish for the future. And words for me are powerful. That is my hope. And I would like to answer that with a quote that Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon that can shape the world.
Sorry about that, Hani, I was taking a sip of water. Ahmed, we've seen the power of journalism. Speaking of the power of words, we've seen the power of journalism this last week in the coverage of the Murugappan family and the swell of public support for them, including from members of the coalition government. Do you think the Australian public has a clear understanding of our country's government's policies on migration and detention, and particularly for visas for people who arrive seeking asylum. It seems that when we see cases like the Murugapan family, everyone has a whole lot of generosity to give. Do they really understand what we're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Verity. Look, in short, I think probably not. I think the Australian government has been very good at using a lot of buzzwords, such as labelling people who arrived in Australia either as illegal arrivals or trying to defend their policies by saying we're trying to stay strong on borders to sort of influence the public perception on the issue of refugees coming to Australia. And then I feel like what gets lost in this is sort of the real people that are being affected by these by this perception and by this sort of description, where they have fled situations of incredible violence and persecution just to seek safety, really. So I think this is where the coverage of the Murugapan family and sort of highlighting the Australian government's treatment of them has been an incredible effort, in terms of an incredible journalistic effort, to both bring to light the horrible situation that this family in particular has found themselves in, but also to the larger issue that people seeking asylum and refugees in Australia face consistently, and I would describe relentlessly, from the government. And just to remind them again of how the process impacts real people and families. I mean, it's brought to light, again, issues such as people spending years on end held in immigration detention, awaiting an outcome on their protection visa application, or the fact that even people who aren't being held in immigration detention but would have arrived in Australia back in 2013 and 2014 and we know now of people that are still waiting 8 years or more for an outcome on that application, having developed, strong ties to the communities they live in, only then potentially be asked to leave the country if they are unsuccessful with their application. But even if they are successful, and I'm sure Hani and Bahid can speak even more to this, you're then only afforded a temporary protection visa, meaning that you have to go through this process all over again within 3 or 5 years, depending on what you're granted. And just to finish that thought off, I think it's sad for us to sort of witness the plight or the struggles of the Murugapan family. I'm sure they wouldn't have wanted to have such a bright light shone on their situation. But I think that it is important that this story stays with everyone, so that public discourse around this topic stays alive and continues on, and that as the public, we can hold the government accountable to their actions and what I would describe as their general indifference towards people seeking asylum.
Yes, I think that in a way the Murugapan family shows the human face of the policies, doesn't it? Until you actually see how it impacts on a particular family, it can all seem a bit, esoteric and far distanced from people. And speaking about that, I mean, how you get people involved in the issue really is making people understand and feel empathy and put themselves in other people's shoes. So I might start with you, Bucket, but it's actually a question for everyone on the panel. For those who are just beginning to learn more, including our audience today, of whom many are high school and university students, how would you recommend that they begin to engage with communities from a refugee background and get to understand the issues? What do you think, Bucket?
Thank you, Verity. I think the only things that I can ask others to get engaged with people who are seeking asylum or refugee people, it's to ask them, to sit with them and ask them what kind of experience they had and what kind of stories they have, and listen to their story and acknowledge their story. That's the only way. That's a very good way to get engaged with them, and that's a very good way to build that connection and to learn from people who are seeking asylum. And I think it's the simple thing is just to listen to their story. And I knew Hani Adin she's writing, and that's a very powerful tool. Can get others to engage, and in particular the wider Australian community.
What do you think, Dorothy? How do you recommend people become engaged with both the communities and the issues faced by refugee communities?
Well, you know, I mean, I worked in a school for a long time, and I think I'll start by saying education's a fundamental human right. One that we take a bit for granted here in Australia, but refugees can't take anything for granted, and particularly education. I've just been stunned this weekend by reading the latest figures for displaced persons from the UNHCR. It's 82.4 million people. That's 1% of the world's population is now displaced. And probably about 27 or 28,000 million of those people are refugees. That's displaced outside their country. Situation not going to go away. Australia doesn't take a very great number of people. The latest figures, of course, were there was a refugee intake of about 17,000 people in 2018, 2019, before the program ground to a halt with the pandemic. And out of that, there were 6,845 children, most of whom came into our schools. So we had up to 60% of our students at Holroyd were of refugee background or refugee-like background. And you ask what I might do as a principal, or what I did as a principal to make that work for our students. Well, I involved not only the kids but their parents as well. We had a program of bringing particularly the mothers, but the fathers also, into the school once a week for English lessons. We provided childcare. We had, it was like a social grouping, and then we did excursions for parents, because one of the things about refugees is that they don't go anywhere. They don't have holidays. They don't go away for the weekend. They can't go anywhere. The things that control their lives bind them to home, particularly the women. And so we ran a series of excursions for parents and kids, and we took them to the Zoom. We went to Canberra to see our seat of government. That must have been interesting. And we went to Vaucluse House and things like that. And we also were involved with the miraculous Rosemary Kariuki, who's our Community Person of the Year in Australia. And we had mothers and daughters evenings where we were able to bring women who weren't in social situation into providing food and dancing and no men, and it was all terrific and things like those are fairly important. But in the school, to work to make the school welcoming, inclusive, well, that doesn't happen by itself, and that's something that students and teachers need to understand. That you actually have to work on making an inclusive environment. You have to consciously involve students from diverse backgrounds in the life of the school and include them, because and not exclude or marginalize them in any way. And you can do that without meaning to, because what you do sometimes is that you assume that people who are new into the school or into a university or a TAFE college bracket are going to know what the ground rules are, but of course they don't. And so you have to work to include people into the educational community, and you have to make sure that they know they're being included as well, and that everyone's part of that. So it's a cultural issue. The school has to change its school culture to being open and transparent and helpful, because that's the other thing. It's if you don't help people when they're in a completely alien environment, then they tend to go and sit by themselves at lunchtime and so on. And everyone has to understand those rules, the ground rules, I mean. I don't mean the school rules, they're different. School rules are about, don't bring your mobile phone to school and don't hit anybody and things like that. The ground rules are actually the rules of social interaction, and they determine the way that we interact with each other. I mean, one of the things I did, I decided I'd take away all the barriers that existed for all of my students to their learning. And one of the first things I did as a principal was to dismantle all the school rules, and then negotiate with the community. Out of that, we got the concept of respect, and that and then its twin, responsibility, came to govern everything that we did in the school. And I don't think that you can have a welcoming environment without having respect for other people. That was deeply embedded in the way we ran the school. I made no judgments about the students and their behaviour unless they kept doing the same thing over and over, in which you have to worry about your intelligence, really, if you keep making this mistake again and again. But those core concepts of respect and responsibility became the way that we worked the school. So it wasn't about tolerance. Tolerance is about making do. It was actually deeper than tolerance. It was a foundational thing. It was a respect for yourself. You couldn't respect yourself if you didn't respect others, and you had to respect the community, and you also had responsibility for what you were doing. Responsibility is about ensuring our individual and collective part in a respectful community. That's where I started from, and that was remarkably successful, I have to say. Sorry,
that's amazing. Wonderful to hear that. I especially like the idea of throwing out the rules and then renegotiating, and that being that respect.
It's a bit edgy.
Yeah, could have gone all sorts of ways, but clearly it worked. Hani, throughout Dorothy talking about that, you were nodding away, so I could see that spoke to you. What would be your advice about, engaging with communities from refugee backgrounds and getting that communication happening?
I think I will say listening, because listening is, I think it's so powerful. I think we have to listen people's story deeply. And also, I think we need to be clear with a lot of things. I think we have this idea of, there's a lot of blame in this system. And I think we should not blame the public. We should blame and put a hold to the government that put people in prison and put people on certainty. Because you can have a future, but a future with certainty, it doesn't work. It brings people's hope, it brings a lot of things. So what I think is all of us as a population, what we have to do is we have to hold our governments into account about how they treat human beings. Because we are not goats, we're not you can't fence people. I think enough is enough. It's been longer than 8 years that people are on a temporary visas and all that. But we have this idea, it's the media versus the government versus the public, and there's all this blame. We need to put those blame aside and just put account a system that put people in prison, a system that is designed to actually kill humanity by cell. So my advice would be listening, and actually as a collective people, we should be able to put our governments into account and say enough is enough. People shouldn't be on temporary visas. People shouldn't be on a pending limbo. People shouldn't be. Humans are humans, no matter where they're born and who they are. We all have an equal rights in the eyes of God. So why can't we just practice that? It's easy.
Sold. Thank you for that, Hani. Bakit, you are deeply involved in volunteering and giving back to the community, which I think is really admirable. And you're also studying a community services diploma at TAFE. So you clearly find community really important. How has, I suppose, both your studies but also your volunteering helped you, and why is community so important for you?
Actually, I found volunteering or engaging with the community through the school while I was studying at Surbiton Senior College. And at Surbiton Senior College, I was in South Australia. And at the school, they have Rotary Club and Rotaract for people in our age. So during that time, we hold every Monday, we hold meetings, and then and I became a member of that Rotary Club. So each Monday we have meetings, and through the meetings, I progressed to the next year. I was engaged with them, and then I was lucky enough to be member of the executive team. So where I have to work with the manager of Rotary, and then during that time, we do a lot of volunteering work to the community. So that's why we see the real Australian spirit, because you get engaged with Australian people and you interact and you share this aim, because everyone's coming there to volunteer. And I found a lot of teachers, they sacrifice their time to come and volunteer. And it's very rare to find teacher volunteering or someone who's volunteers their time. But that's really resonate with me. And also I have been in touch with my teacher. He was always says, if uh, I have a minute to watch a TV and there is someone who needed help, I would rather go and help. So this kind of a link, this kind of link with teachers and getting engaged, actively engaged in the school environment. This will link you to the community as a student, and then it also will help you to see really how Australia is, because part of our our volunteering program, we have to do sausage. We have to cook barbecue sausages at Bunnings on Saturdays, and there is you will see every person coming out of Bunnings. They could they could say smile and say hi, and they could say hi mate, and then they take a barbecue, and then those monies also goes back to the community itself. So this kind of it's so small, but it means a lot to a person like me. I wanted to learn the language. Someone says hi mate, and someone else would come and jokes. They would say, would you put would you put onion first or would you put sausage first? Which ones got first on the bread? So you will learn this, and this will engage you to the community. And I will encourage all the a student to get engaged with the community as well as to get engaged with the teachers at the school, and that will make a good link to volunteering, and that was a way for me to get engaged actually. And after that, I was lucky enough to study at TAFE, and also I'm currently working in the community service as well.
That's fantastic. That's a really good advice to other students out there, just getting involved in volunteering and getting involved in the community. Ahmed, we've had a number of people sort of talk about the big structural difficulties facing asylum seekers in Australia, and Hani really outlined that very strongly. Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges you face in your daily work, just helping people to navigate the Australian legal system?
Yeah, so I think it's important to obviously keep in mind all those larger issues, because they're at the core of then what can force change and make these processes easier. But I mean, day to day for us, as everyone is aware, the law in general and law in Australia can be incredibly complex. And this is especially the case for the laws surrounding the process of seeking asylum and migration laws. And the people we assist at RACS largely either don't speak English or don't speak it as a first language necessarily, and so rely heavily on services like RACS to navigate the process. In turn, we rely again heavily on translators and interpreters to make sure that we're able to sort of explain everything and explain the processes as best we can to our clients. And that can be tricky in a sense, because not only are you navigating the, trying to make it plain English, or trying to sort of bring it down to something that everyone can understand, but also making sure that that language that you're using is also easily interpreted, and making sure that you're keeping everyone informed and making and that they're aware of their situation and what's happening. Another part that is very day to day and something that we struggle with a lot. And we've already touched on this a little bit, but just in terms of how slow the processes are by the government to sort of resolve these applications and to resolve the situations of people who are seeking asylum here. I've obviously heard it firsthand, and I'm sure Bahit and Hani again can speak a lot more to this, but just how draining that process can be and how obviously stressful it can be in terms of how long it lasts. And with RACs, we often have to act as a sort of conduit to that and just try our best to manage those expectations and make sure that RACs as a sort of legal centre is there to support them as we're working through this process, and I guess making sure that we're all sort of engaged in that together to eventually reach an outcome.
And you must have victories some of the time.
Yeah, you definitely do. No, look, you definitely do. I think I don't want to sound too pessimistic about everything, and you obviously do get victories. I think with temporary visas, sometimes the victories are a bit of a bittersweet moment because it provides a bit of a safety net, but obviously in an ideal world, you'd hope that it would be more permanent protection and a more permanent solution for these people who have fled horrific situations. But yeah, I think for me, at least on a personal note, I just feel incredibly grateful to be able to be, doing this work, and I hope that my work and sort of everything I do on a day-to-day basis might end up, helping someone out and really like changing their outlook on life and hopefully giving them a second chance at sort of building a life in the community, building a life and making sure that they can make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. So Hani and Bahit, I might go to you first, Hani. Australia has pretty hostile processes and policies for people who come here seeking asylum and protection. So why do people try to come here?
People come here because sometimes I don't like talking a lot. I like to answer things with one of my favorite poet, Warsan Shira. She said, "No one leaves home until home turns into a mouth of shark." And I think I would answer with that. And we have this, why people leaving, why this is happening. No one actually want to leave their loved ones behind. No one want to walk on an unfamiliar street. No one want to have no one actually want to leave the smell they get to use, gets to know. So people leave because they were forced to leave. And I always, whenever I see these policies and what we left behind, I always call these policies like running from a cheetah, but you're running into a lion. That is, Somalia was a cheetah and Australia is a lion. They're both cats, but with a different purpose. So I think, it sort of makes me to question every day, why? But the main reason people leave because we need safety. We need a place that we can call home. Sometimes you can't call home here and you can't call home back. So we are living in this limbo. So people leave because home turned into a mouth of shark. You can it is, that will reply with that.
Gosh, you can tell you're a poet, honey. That's amazing. Running from the cheetah into the lion. I thought that was an amazing way of putting it.
That is the Australian policy.
Yeah, I know. It's really, really beautifully put. Depressing, but beautifully put. Bahit, what about you? Why do you think people, same as what Hani said, or have you got anything to add to that?
I would say actually it was same, yes. Safety is the biggest concern, and it's not only here, it's international. It's a human, it's everywhere. You could see people migrating from Africa to Europe or from Middle East to Europe. It's a safety issue. And also in the Western world, it's known for advocating for human rights and taking a leadership position. So that's why when we move from our countries to sacrifice and to come to Australia or to other countries, we wanted to see someone who could advocate for us, as well as someone who stand and uphold human rights and human values. So because we are so vulnerable and we're needing a lot of help, it's easier for us to see the person who could help, and and if it's safer and if it's encouraging, we would rather go to there because we wanted to need that protection, and we want that help. I think yeah, and also media was attractive in terms of like attracting us to come to Europe, to come to Western world, because media plays very critical role as well, because they would see what's happening in like war zone, and also they will convey their message to the other to the Western media, and it's also being done through journalism. So therefore, it's also kind of attract us, because you will see someone, for example, in Australia, will talk about incident in Sudan, and that kind of attractive, because you as a migrant or a person who's seeking asylum, you wanted to you want that person to be there to advocate for you. So that's the other thing as well, could help you to come to Australia or to any other country.
Yeah. So Dorothy, what can our schools do, and what can our young people do, I suppose, to be firstly more aware of the experience and challenges of refugees and people seeking asylum, but possibly also to help seek change?
Can you repeat that again? I was just having trouble with my mute.
Oh, sorry. We're sort of, we're hearing all the issues that Australia has with the way that we treat refugees and asylum seekers. Yeah. So my question to you was going to be, what can our schools do, and what can our young people do, and people who work in education, to first to be more aware of the experience and challenges of refugees, but then to actually seek change or help drive change in the way that we treat refugees and asylum seekers in this country?
Yeah, well, there are two issues there. One is the schools, and I would see as part of the duty of care that schools have to their students that they actually need to explore what the real needs of the students in their care are. I mean, if you're a high school and you've got a young asylum seeker come to you, and that person is 17, which is of course now over the minimum age for leaving, I still think that you should enroll that student into the school. Some schools don't. And we need to look at things like enrollment policy. Where is a young person in that sort of that in-between age group? There were 22% of the refugees who came to Australia in 2018-19 were aged between 17 and 29. Now, where's the best place for the younger group of those students to be enrolled? I think in a school, which is sort of small scale and which can actually individualise both the pastoral care for the student and the education, and it's a secure sort of place. So I think we need to be more open-minded and less maybe legalistic in schools about enrolling older students in our schools and our high schools. We need to think about what the real needs of children are who come to us from refugee backgrounds. They've all been through trauma. They've all got interrupted education. They have all lost just about everything along the way, and that includes family members as well. So we need to actually be able to set up support mechanisms in the schools to help them adjust to the new life that they're leading. And that might mean actually working with the parents, moving the parents into support groups like STARTS, which is the Service for the Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture and Trauma Survivors, where people might gain from that sort of counselling. We need to be able to refer people into further assistance beyond the scope of the school. And I think we should also not be seeing the school as being, well, it's 3 o'clock, we can't meet to discuss your issue. I think when you're dealing with refugee children, you've got a lot of things to think about. We had to think about basic health care, dental care, for example, and supply that. We found that towards the end of my work there, we had an intake of Syrian children And a lot of those children were quite deaf, and they were deaf because their eardrums had suffered damage from the bombing that they'd been subjected to. Now, when you start to unpick things, you actually have to be sympathetic to those things. As far as students go, as well as teachers and so on, I think we need to walk in the shoes of the refugees much more than we do. We need that empathetic approach to dealing with people. And, people seeking asylum and people who are refugees are an important part of our Australian story. There's been, since the 1930s, about 1 million refugees have come to Australia. A lot of the population is descended from people who were refugees, and that we don't acknowledge that. It's not out there in the public discourse. It's not there in the school curriculum. Children aren't taught about the migration story, which is one of the great success stories of Australia. It's almost as though we were a bit ashamed of it and we put it aside. And I think we need to be doing that. For young people, there are lots of places to inform yourself. I really don't think you should go into these debates without information. You can go onto the UNHCR website and find out what the rules are. You can read the Convention on the Rights of the Child. You can read the Refugee Convention. They're all downloadable from the net. You can join groups, like you could join, Women for Refugees, or you could join UNICEF and Amnesty and things like that. And you need to be informed. You need to approach this debate with your head and not just your heart. Your heart is what you bring to the issue with the refugees themselves. But your head is what you argue with an often obdurate and cruel set of policies that the government's put up to exclude some asylum seekers from our community. So you've got to be informed, and it's easy to get that information. And there is a lot of information available in schools, which is of great. It's probably gathering dust in the school library as I speak. I think that those are the things we need to be looking outwards. We need to maintain our human empathy. Remember that we have more in common than we have, which is different in our common humanity. Those are important things.
Wonderful. So my next question, I'm actually going to now go to the audience. So the audience have been asking questions, and there's some lovely ones in there. So I'm going to start doing them. And I might start with the one that's got the most number of votes so far, which is from Alison Cork. And she's asking, I might get you to lead this off, Dorothy, actually, but I'll ask each of our panellists this question. Is there any chance we will see a royal commission into refugees, asylum seekers, and our treatment of them? What do you think, Dorothy? Do you think there's any chance of that?
No, I think it's extremely unlikely. I don't think that that the murkier ends of the treatment of asylum seekers are things that the government wants to be dragged into the light under sort of the power of a royal commission, which is compelling people to speak the truth. And the treatment of the Tamil family, Murugappans, is a good example of that. What possible justification can you have for treating children in that fashion? And it's of course a breach of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to which Australia is a signatory. And it's a breach of what would be the law in every state jurisdiction. You know, I was a mandatory reporter of child abuse, and the emotional abuse of those children alone would have made me have to make a report to the relevant child protection authorities about that. The incarceration of those children, just a whole lot of stuff there which would be reportable in our community. Now, when I'm sure the government doesn't want all of that starting to be unravelled in a public forum. So no, I don't think we're going to see a Royal Commission.
Ahmed, what do you think? Do you think, is it something we should be pushing for, or is this just unlikely to happen?
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as Dorothy. I can't see I can't see how it would happen. I don't think the government will be willing to sort of accept that, take that on. I just think, yeah, again, I agree wholeheartedly with everything Dorothy said. There's just too much there that that the government would not want to be sort of out there in the public and in the form of a sort of royal commission. What we do have and what we can all refer to is reports by the Australian Human Rights Commission, ombudsman reports that are out there that have investigated this, even some international sources. But I think that's probably going to be the limit of that, and I can't see a royal commission coming into it. Yeah.
I'll ask you the next one too, Ahmed, because it's got a legal focus. Rhonda Duong asks, with the newly passed Migration Amendment Bill, do you think we will be seeing an increase of refugees in detainment now that they can't be deported? What can be done to rally for the law to be revoked?
Yes, that's a really good question. It's a very specific legal question. But I think, no, you're right. I think the way the amendment bill sort of came to pass, or at least was displayed, it was, I think, well hidden behind this facade of we're just enshrining it in law that people who are found to be owed protection or found that if they were returned to their country of origin, they would be harmed, we are now not going to deport them. Although that has been practiced this whole time, now they just sort of codified it. Now, the issue there becomes that, yes, exactly what Rhonda mentions is that because they can't be returned and because they would have been detained, for example, for not holding a visa or whatever the situation was that resulted in them being detained, they are now stuck in limbo, almost reinforcing this notion of, well, they will be detained until a viable solution is reached. But yeah, so I think you're very right. I think it's a sort of, I saw it as a very sneaky way, or very sort of sneakily way to introduce the idea of indefinite detention in a very real sense, which is incredibly disappointing from our government.
Is there anything we can do to rally for it to be revoked?
I mean, again, the strongest thing is always, I think, public opinion and public discourse, and make sure to sort of stay educated and knowledgeable on these topics, like when this passed, to make sure to look into it and see what, I guess, the experts in the field are talking about it and what the idea is. And then from that, just remain engaged with your local MPs, remain engaged with your communities to make sure that your voice is heard, because I think the only real way that a lot of this stuff can change and that we can make sure to hold the government accountable is to have that public discourse and to have that strong public opinion that can hopefully shift some of these government policies.
Mm.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. The next question is from Mary Jones, and it's for Hani and Bakit. So I might start with you, Bakit. She's asking, what kind of an impact does a temporary protection visa have on your life?
Yeah, the temporary protection visa had a lot of impact. The first of the impact that like, because it's a short-term visa, it can limit and restrict people's rights. For example, accessing education, and it's very hard because we're not considered to be an Australian or permanent protection holders. So we cannot access education. That's the other thing, as well as it will limit our rights to access other services like the other Australian can access those services. For example, we cannot access service like applying for housing. You cannot apply for housing, as well as because it's limited, so it kind of put person into positions that they can move forward with their life to make progress, and just they stay there. You know, it keeps you there, and it just it's very hard position to be in.
Mm.
It's emotionally hard as well as mentally as well, and for people who don't get access to housing. In terms of that as well, because there is an increase because of COVID, there is increase in homelessness. and particularly people who are seeking asylum in Australia, and that's very hard. It's very hard for them to access those services, as well as because they are because it's related with emotions. So people get dragged into situation, and it's kind of mentally very hard situation to be in. And also because it's related with accessing to service. If a person does not have good qualification during this COVID as well, they cannot get good work or the work that they desire to keep to work to keep themselves or at least to have some income that they can depend on, as well as because there is an increase in services because there is an increase in people because there is a decrease in people trying to seek for services. Sorry, sorry, you can go ahead, Verity.
Yeah. No, it's exactly right, though. I really like the point you made about how you can't get access to the physical services and supports, but it's also got an emotional and mental impact. It's quite debilitating. Hani, do you have anything to add on that about the impact that being under temporary visa can feel like?
Yeah, I think I would emphasize more actually what Packet said, which is the mental health, because I think like what we don't understand more is like it's okay, like you're free, you're outside, but like a freedom, by the time you get all you wanted, you're actually mentally damaged. And this actually and also I think like the government, if they're gonna put us on a temporary visas, they should set up a permanent counseling for us. It will be like 5 years of counseling. I will be happy with that. I think the mental health actually that comes with this is like a lot. And I think people are actually losing their mind. And I think COVID-19 also contributed into that a lot, because you won't be able to get government assistance. You don't get all the things and that makes you more worthless. That makes people become more mentally damaged. By the time I think by the time everyone gets a permanent residence or citizens, they will be ending up in a cycle hotel.
Yeah.
This is my thing, and I think that is you can have and I love what RACS does and all the community services that we have, but certainty is one thing. Certainty, you need certainty in our lives. That is what you need. You need purpose. You can have all the things, other things you need, but if you don't have the certainty, that affects the mental health of every individual who are on a temporary visa. Some people are actually on a 6-month visa. How can you live on a 6-month visa? At least us who are on a temporary protection visa, at least we got 5 years of uncertainty. But how do you live? What do you do? Can you get a lease? Can you go to the real estate and be I have a 6-month visa, can you rent me a house? That is the contribution. The government don't understand. They think they're fixing things, but they're actually contributing 100% into homelessness and into the mental health of this country. They're making people crazy by introducing policies that will give you, shoot you with a gun, but mental shot. People are going crazy. So I would support the mental health of this. People need a proper settlement or proper counseling. Give me 5 years of visa and 5 years of counseling.
I think you're totally right. I think living with uncertainty is impossible, really, really psychologically difficult. So you're spot on, Hani. It's ridiculous that we make people suffer like this. Dorothy, I'm a bit mindful of the time, but I do want to ask you this question because I know you'll know the answer, and which is around refugee children on temporary visas and whether or not they can go to university. And what's the answer?
The answer is yes, they can. That particular issue was one that I fought very hard 20 years ago almost now, with the right to continue education beyond the age of 18 at school and get an HSC and the right to go to university. However, the problem is that universities are obliged to charge full international student fees for people on temporary visas. That includes, of course, asylum seekers. So what we've had to do is establish a support system through the universities of scholarships for young people on temporary visas from a refugee or asylum seeker background so that they can attend. And that means full scholarships. That can mean, you know, I mean, $120,000 it could be the cost of a degree. And it also means that people are going to need some form of support while they're at university because, as you understand, most asylum seekers are not entitled to any form of financial support after they turn 18. So what I did initially was, as more of our students, asylum seeker students at Holroyd, got HSC results that were good enough to get them into university, I negotiated an individual level with the universities about scholarships. But then it seemed that there were other students who were like that. So I started writing to all the high schools, public high schools, with asylum seeker students saying, give me a list of the names of the people who are competitive and we'll submit that to the universities. And that has been taken over since then by the Department of Education. I convinced the department to carry on that program because it was actually making a life difference to young people. And only 4 weeks ago, I had 6 young people, former students, arrive at my house for morning tea, which went on until afternoon tea time, I have to say. Six of them all had been helped at school by our support processes. All of them had been to university. They were all graduates of university. They were all in full-time employment, all very terrific young people making their way in life, but 3 of them on temporary visas. And so 3 of them had needed that sort of additional support to go to university. So if you're a teacher in a school, and it could be a rural school, it could be a metropolitan school, and you've got a student, an asylum seeker student who's good enough to go to university, make sure that you get in touch with the multicultural education people in the Department of Education and say, this is my student, we shouldn't miss him or her out of from that list. Most universities now do offer humanitarian scholarships, and I have to say, Verity, UTS has a very generous allocation of those scholarships.
Yes, thank you for that. And I do want to urge anyone who's on the line who is a student from a refugee, asylum seeker background and on a temporary visa, UTS offers 16 scholarships a year for humanitarian students where you don't have to pay any university fees. And we also have philanthropists who help with your living expenses, but we're not the only university. So there are other universities who do this as well. So please, please, please make sure you check out universities and see their scholarship options because there's lots available for you. Now, we've only got 3 minutes to finish, so I thought I would finish with Hani and Bakhet, since you are our stars. Now, you're both at the moment studying in either higher education at university or in TAFE. And can we end on a simple question, which is, what do you hope to do once you've finished? Bakhet, what do you hope to do?
I'm currently studying TAFE. I'm studying community services, and when I finish, I would like to study social work actually, and to continue advocating for others.
That's wonderful. So you're continuing your volunteering and community activity on into your professional career.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. Hani, what do you plan to do when you're finished?
I want to be, when I finish my degree, I want to be a political correspondent, keep ScoMo under control. I'm joking.
You could be a political correspondent.
I think, yeah, because I think that is, I wanna use journalism and creative writing as a way of enhancing humanity, because I think we have a great, amazing journalist in our society who inspires me all the time, and I wanna I want to I want to water the seeds that they put on the ground and keep on going.
That is wonderful. So both of you are going to make a huge contribution. So thank you so much. We're very, very lucky to have you here. So thanks again to all of our panelists. It's 1 minute to 2, so I will now thank everyone for coming. Thank you all for contributing and taking time out of your busy lives. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. I think you'll agree that that was a really great panel and a really interesting insight and hopefully knowledge. And hopefully also giving people a bit of inspiration to go out and actually fight for the rights of refugees and asylum seekers in this country to be treated fairly under the law and in accordance with the international obligations that we've signed up to. So thank you everyone for joining us. As usual, the podcast, this will be available online. We record it and we'll send the link out to everyone if you want to share it with your contacts and networks. And thanks again, and we'll see you all soon.